all the technical issues.
We're sorry for you.
So I found it the best we can. It's not perfect in the slideshow, but we'll get through it. There are a couple of videos I was going to show. I'm not going to attempt that because it might mess everything up again. So you'll have the links at least to be able to look at them if you want to. I want to kind of start off by going through the fact that I'm not what's considered your typical environmentalist. I do consume meat products or animal products. I'm just careful to make sure that they come from sustainable sources. So just realizing, like, a lot of the time I hear that it's hard for people that have less money to not eat factory farm meat or animal products, dairy. And I understand that. Growing up, I came from a family where we weren't privileged enough to worry about where our food came from necessarily. So it took time to transition myself and my family and understand it all. And then in that process, get really angry over what I'd been been a part of, and realizing my voice and being able to share my voice with others. So I think with your group, a lot of what we'll go over today, see, it looks different here, are things that you guys may already know and be aware of because you are very active. Although you may not feel that way, different areas of the state that have a CAFO coming in don't always have the resistance, or we really don't see the resistance that you guys have had here. So we'll go over a little bit of history of industrial animal agriculture in Michigan, the Right to Farm Act, the situation, you guys already talked about it, the situation in and around here. I'll also talk about just the watershed, big watershed picture. So we already heard from the activists and then Dr. Rubel. And so we'll talk about the need for a SNOFRO ban. Seems that everybody knows a bit about that and what you can do today. So factory farm, CAFO, industrial agriculture, operation, many names, we're all talking about the same thing. And so it's a concentrated animal feeding operation. That's what CAFO stands for. And so that's an approach to raising livestock, as many as possible on as little land as possible. And it's unsustainable in reality. So, yeah, it looks so funny. So we go over what a CAFO is, understanding that an AFO is animal feeding operation, where they'll be confined for 45 days or more within a year, within a 12-month period of time. For 45 days or more. And there's no typical crops or vegetation on these so-called farms. And a CAFO is just a larger version of an AFO, animal feeding operation. It meets certain thresholds. I had threshold handouts, if everybody's seen them, or I can pass them around. It's the next slide, but I don't think that we can see it very well. If anybody wants to see, this shows you that it's for a large CAFO. So we have small, medium, and large CAFOs. And only the large CAFOs are the ones that are regulated by a state agency. So when we talk about 272, that was the number in 2017. So we're at about almost 300 CAFOs regulated by state agency. That's just the large column. So that's 700 full-grown mature dairy cows or more. And a lot of these facilities use the 1-under rule. So if they have 699, they don't need a permit. And that's very typical. So if you didn't get one of these, I can pass them around, or they're over here. Just kind of giving so people understand that these are large facilities with hundreds, thousands, sometimes even millions of animals, and they produce millions of gallons of waste annually. So this is, let's see, just a picture of I said 272 CAFOs. This was by 2017. And we've seen several new come into the state, expecting even more as time goes on. This was one of the videos, Right to Pollute. It's a short video, really gives an inside idea. Some of the people in this area are in it, of what it's like to be on the ground near a CAFO, to be a neighbor having a CAFO come in. So a lot of what all of you have dealt with. I'm not going to attempt it. So going over the history of CAFOs, this goes back to the 1980s. There was a crisis, farmers consolidated, and we've seen fewer farms with the same amount of livestock, generally the same amount of livestock, so just consolidating into larger and larger farms. And in 1981, the Michigan Right to Farm Act was passed you had suburban sprawl going into rural areas, and at the time it really was to protect these larger industrial farmers from nuisance complaints, having the two communities coming together in the way they were at the time. Things have changed significantly since then, and nowadays the Right to Farm Act is really used to prop up industrial agriculture. We've seen several amendments to Right to Farm through the years, basically taking away more and more of the rights of local governments. And then GAMPs, generally acceptable agricultural, make sure I say it right. Generally accepted agricultural management practices. You probably hear about GAMPs. That's something, when we were able to sit down at Sierra Club with MDARD, Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, and talk about GAMPs and what changes we would like to see. And again, like I mentioned earlier, all of these state agencies are a lot friendlier to us, but in a way that a lot of us have never experienced because of the past administrations. So in 1996, the Farm Bill created subsidies that were originally meant for small, struggling, beginning farmers. They weren't meant for these industrial-sized facilities. And today, it's these same subsidies that are now they're able to get those. That's what really props up this entire system. So, and it's really important at Sierra Club and our entire Great Lakes, Great Farms Great Lakes Coalition, which is Food and Water Watch, socially, SRAP, socially responsible agricultural program. The project, I'm sorry. We've all come together, and we're not anti-farmer. And so a lot of people, when you talk about industrial agriculture or being against factory farms, people think that means we're not anti-farmer. It's this system of subsidies that forces people that want to be farmers into industrial agriculture, where they're no longer farming, they're managing a facility. They don't generally want to be doing this either. And so this talks about where we are now. So the International Joint Commission report on progress by the US and Canada water quality reported that the part of the water in Lake Erie is unacceptable. The voluntary measures that we have in Michigan are not working. We need stricter mandatory regulations for these facilities. So we all hear about Lake Erie. I'm sure everybody's aware, but last year we had a large algal bloom in Lake Superior as well. So the problems are not just in Lake Erie. And so why do we care if it's confined versus pasture-based? There are environmental issues, mainly water quality. CAFOs consume lots of clean water, and the waste goes back into that clean water. Millions of gallons of waste a year from each facility are spread on the fields nearby. So what should be a natural and positive asset in manure itself is good for farming. It's overloading these fields. They oversaturating them. They can only hold so much nutrients. So the big problem is the dissolved phosphorus gets through the tiles and into the groundwater, eventually into our waterways and into the Great Lakes. So air pollution and public health. Again, this is because of the Michigan Right to Farm Act, something we have very little recourse with. There's a lot of problems, related to this that Michigan Right to Farm Act really protects. And the economic and community impacts. A lot of these farmers that run these facilities are in contracts with large corporations that control every aspect of how they run their facility. And again, that's not something they generally go into farming wanting to do. One thing I'm gonna go back. One thing I think that is not often thought of, you talked about local wells, but also just the roads. So with the big trucks that move the manure, they have stress on local roadways, and that's something that goes to the local community as well. So there's a lot of pieces to this that we're paying for, and they're profiting from. So we're gonna talk about why we need a snow throw ban. You guys did mention it, so I assume you know a bit about it. Have people seen this map in the past? So this is the way the water flows in the Great Lakes Basin. And this is important to understand. A lot of people will look at Lake Erie and say, of course we're seeing algae blooms in other Great Lakes now, but why are the problems so severe in Lake Erie, right? It's gotta be something over there. But because of the way our water flows, anything in Lake Superior or Lake Huron ends up in Lake Erie. So whatever we're doing up there, and realizing that, you know, a good majority of our PFOS are right around here, that's all flowing out to the Great Lakes and ending up in Lake Erie. And this is actually something we just got from Eagle this year, and it's really interesting. It shows CAFOs and the impaired watersheds with the E. coli as well as the added nutrients. Let me see it again. The statewide, the E. coli are the yellow, the little green triangles are the CAFOs, and the purple are the nutrient impairment and Lake Erie nutrient impairment. So that really shows a picture of how it correlates together.
What is the green?
The green dots, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
The little green dots are CAFOs. Those are the factory farms and where they're spread out in relation to E. coli and nutrient impairment. So these are just facts. It says Michigan CAFO facts, but really this is a lot of facts about algae blooms because they're so intimately related. This year we're expecting them to be pretty significant. There's already been one reported by NOAA in Lake Erie. It started just because of the excess rains we really got this spring. The problem could be really significant. So what's the difference, right, between a confined animal feeding operation and a sustainable animal feeding operation? What do they do differently with waste? And so in sustainable farms, the waste to land ratio is an appropriate amount. So again, manure is not a bad thing for farming. We